Welcome to Pause for Peace with me, Pastor Jule. Here we are in March 2025, and the church has turned its attention to a special season that we call the season of Lent. I talked about this a little bit in our podcast last week as we focused on the way we kick off this season with that special ritual of Ash Wednesday. And I want us to focus a little bit more on these weeks ahead and the 40 days of Lent that we have as Christians in order to be about spiritual practices that might bring a little bit more balance to our life, that might get us a little bit out of thinking too much about ourselves and focusing on the ways we can be of service or of help to others in the world, even if it's like just helping out our friends in a new way, instead of always taking and grabbing their attention and needing and wanting from people all the time, and maybe being that person who can be a bit more centered in ourselves, clear about meeting our own needs, and able then to offer ourselves to the world, even to our friends, our family, and those we love the most. Historically, the season of Lent has been this time of preparation, an intense period, just 40 days, not counting the Sundays, but this intense period of truly being able to go inward and to be clear about the cost of being on this path of following in the way of love. There are things that I have to kind of give up in my life when I say that I commit to the way of love. There might be attitudes that I hold that actually get in the way of being in connection with other people. There might be habits that I have developed which keep me really from being able to flourish. There may be disciplines that I don't have in my life. I might not even have any kind of prayer practice, any kind of way to stop and to ask something greater than myself to help, to be present in the ways that we know God always is. But when we don't attune ourselves to that connection with God, we're missing out. God's not missing out. We are the ones missing out. Those are all things that I can pay attention to during this season of Lent. And there are a lot of folks, there are Christian traditions, and I'm sure in other religious practices there are traditions as well. There are people in Christian traditions who often focus on something I'm going to give up for Lent. And while that might be a good and helpful practice of committing to give something up for Lent, the purpose of giving anything up for Lent, if you hear that language at all, the purpose is to align ourselves more to this way of love, to focus more and more of myself, more of my time, more of my abilities to this path of following the Spirit's call to live in love with all creation, with all human beings. And if my Lenten discipline, my Lenten practice isn't clearing the space for that to take place, then there's no purpose really in giving something up for Lent. I don't believe that Jesus was about imposing strict rules on us to make life no fun whatsoever. Jesus was calling us and is calling us to be people who are open and gracious and generous, people who are trusting even amid very challenging things taking place in our culture and in our world, people who are trusting that there is a higher way and a higher force that is working for the good of all. And aligning ourselves then with that way, this is part of what it means to follow in the way of the path of love, to follow Jesus, to follow the way of the Christ. And I'm inviting us in this podcast, which is being released this first weekend of this season of Lent in 2025. I want to invite us to spend some time reflecting. And I'll take us through a little reflective practice where we can be listening for what might be getting in the way in our life of being able to be that person who is open and generous and kind and ready to love and even ready to align a little bit more with that calling of living in a way of trust of something bigger, something greater, this force that so many of us call God, trusting that God, who is love, is all about bringing hope and wholeness throughout all of this creation. And we can fall deeper into trust of that as something that we pay attention to during this season of Lent. So, if you'll join me, I appreciate this time when we can actually pause, get ourselves quiet. And I love for us to try a little breathing practice today. So warm up your feet, get them flat on the earth somewhere. You might want to be heel-toeing your feet underneath you. No matter where you are in this world, there is earth under you somewhere. And so we want to imagine that connection that we have, that our feet themselves have with the earth underneath us, digging those roots deep down into the earth, just imagining from the bottom of our feet coming like this little tendril of energy coming down and connecting us deep in the earth. And our breathing practice I'd like us to do to kind of get us clear to be able to listen today is to actually breathe, imagine like you're breathing from your feet all the way in and allowing the energy of the earth, the oxygen of the earth to come all the way up through you. And then almost like this reciprocal, when you breathe out, allowing that to return. And what we exhale becomes what other beings, especially the trees and the plants, need what we exhale. We need what they exhale. It's just this reciprocal relationship with all of creation. So if you are in a place where you can close your eyes, you can turn yourself inward. We might even literally feel ourselves as we close our eyes, as we allow our attention to float downward through our heart, even deeper within, all the way down to that energy of our feet that is connecting us with the earth, and the energy of the earth connecting and holding us as well. And then we're going to start breathing. And when we breathe, we're going to do that, breathing in all of what we need from the earth, okay? And allowing that to just, like a wave, kind of be in this circular pattern. So let's go ahead and take our first deep breath. We can hold it before we release and return to the earth what is needed. And one more deep breath, and that's where we're taking, you might even focus your attention on feeling the movement of that breath coming all the way from your feet up through your diaphragm and out. I can't explain that while I'm trying to do the breath, so let's go ahead and breathe. Breathe in and breathe out. And keep that circle going as you breathe in and breathe out. Make sure you're still expanding your diaphragm. Your belly's going out and in, out and in. And breathe out. I'm going to do this a few more times, breathing in, imagining everything coming from the bottom of the circle of the earth. In the breathe in and the exhale is the returning of the circle. and out. One more deep breath in, and an exhale out. And as we exhale this time, let's settle into the core of our being. It might be helpful to focus on the space of your heart and the center of your chest. Or maybe you want to focus even deeper, where that diaphragm, where that belly was moving out and in, and kind of anchor yourself there in that place deep within. If you are finding yourself pulled off or thinking about other things, then return to that circular, cyclical pattern of breathing out and in, and then settling yourself back deep into your inner core of your being. The breath can take us back again and again. And let's get a little bit still in the center of that core. You might even put your hand on your belly and imagine you can feel the energy, that center of your core. We want to be listening as we're in this stillness. We want to be listening for what really is happening in your life or in my life. I'm asking myself, what's happening in my life that truly is getting in the way of me being able to be that person that radiates that love and that compassion and that welcome and that generosity of spirit? What is getting in the way of me being that person of love each and every day? And if you'll listen to the deepest core of your being that has a knowing beyond knowing. This is what Thomas Merton called the nothingness of God that is within us. This is the place where nothing can touch. This core diamond, immortal diamond of who we are. Nothing can mar it. This is the Spirit of God, the pneuma of God that is alive in us. The life force itself that is within us. And we want to listen for the wisdom that will come. Asking to be shown, to have revealed what it is about my life, how I spend my time, how I do or don't use my abilities, the way that I might handle money or waste money on frivolous things. What is it that is getting in the way of me being that radiant being of love? There's no harsh judgment on ourselves here. We must become aware first, because there are patterns and attitudes and actions that every one of us does each and every day that are unconscious. We don't know why we're doing or saying or thinking all the time what we are. And so becoming aware is the first step, but don't allow the awareness to come with some sense of punitive, harsh judgment. That voice has no use here. Not now, not about this. Keep listening if you haven't yet had a sense. And you might even imagine yourself being that radiant being. What's getting in the way. I have these super cool little power thought cards, and one that I pulled this week reminded me that I have a choice. I have a choice as to what goes on in my head. If I allow my head to be full of positive thoughts about myself or negative thoughts about myself, or positive thoughts about my situation or other people, or negative thoughts about my situation or other people, I have a choice to control that inner voice. I have a choice to be filled with nothing but positivity and love, which doesn't mean I live a Pollyanna life. It means that I am choosing an inner mantra, you might say, inner dialogue that is graceful, that is kind even to myself, that is forgiving, because all of us are going to make some mistakes along the way each day. And I have an ability to be honest about that and to be choosing to align once again with love, even love for self. When I understand that I am this beautiful, radiant being of God here to live love each and every day, I then have a choice to surround myself with words that keep me grounded in that and that allow me to wrestle some days with, what does that look like? How could Jesus' life show me best how to be? So whatever you might be hearing in this quiet, as you reflect upon your life, as you listen for the deep wisdom coming from within, which is the wisdom of God coming through you to speak to you about what gets in the way of living as that radiant being of light and love that you are, that you truly are, and that you are being called to cultivate and be and to have expand through each and every season of your journey. And when I have heard that, I want us to then reflect upon, almost be listening for that call to, what can I do about this? How can this season of Lent, these 40 days of Lent, be a time when I change that, when I choose something different than that? So we go back inward. Let's do the cyclical breathing one more time, taking our breath in all the way deep from the earth before we release it and return what we no longer need and what the earth needs. Deep breath in and release. A deep breath in, all the way deep down from our feet through our whole being. And release. Our breath reminding us of this cyclical way that we are called to live in this world, this interdependent way that we are. Our breath itself is interdependent on other beings, and other beings are interdependent with us. We're like all woven up together in this grand creation. When one suffers, the others suffer as well. If I live in a world with no vegetation, I'm not going to be able to breathe as well. It's just the bottom line. And what I have to release isn't going to feed what's around me. It's just the bottom line. So let's listen in the quiet, back in that centered place within. If you're getting pulled off, take another deep cyclical breath. Now we're listening for what can I do? How can I change this that I've become aware of that is keeping me from living as this glorious, radiant being of God? What can be different? What practice might I need to take on in these next 40 days? So that at the end of this season of preparation, I'm going to be like in the habit, if you will. It's only going to take 21 days to create a habit. So if I have 40 days, I'll definitely be able to be in the habit and almost be perfected by the end of 40 days of this new way of being. Whether that means that I've become aware that my self-talk is very much getting in the way of being my radiant self, then I'm going to commit some practice during these next 40 days to stop that way of not being positive in my self-talk. If there's an emotion that I let run rampant again and again and again throughout my days, it could be anger, it could be depression that I continue, not to say, there are those of us who struggle with depression, but there might be a way that I am, even amid my depression, either beating myself up or sort of allowing my depression to create a cloud over everybody else as well. This happens so often with anger. So many of us just fly off the handle. It's one of the things we even say, and so our anger can just easily explode and get all over everybody. And that's not the appropriate way to handle those inner signals that we get that something isn't right in this situation. I could spend the next 40 days committed to a new way of like dancing with my anger, of truly tuning into that inner signal when it begins and making a choice of what I'm going to do then, being deliberately choosing to sit down and to work out what's really bothering me in my anger. By my anger is just a signal. It's a signal that something that I love is being violated. And so I'll dance with that anger until I can listen for a way that that anger can move me to constructive action. Not reaction, but constructive action. So whatever it is we've heard in the quiet, it's getting in the way of us being that radiant being of love, of openness, of generosity, of kindness, of forgiveness, of graciousness. Really being that light in our day-to-day circle, whatever's getting in the way. Now we're listening for what can be done differently. Let's return to our breath. Settle in and listen deeply to the change that can come, the practice to which you can commit these next 40 days. And before we depart our time of stillness, if you need more time, feel free to pause and carry on. But before we collectively depart our time of stillness, it does us no good to hear what we've heard in this time without really committing our will to doing what we've heard we need to be doing. So if it has to do with our self-talk, for instance, then I'm truly, before I come out of this time of quiet, I am committing to that practice. I might have to go to my journal and make a plan, like, okay, how do I stop the negative self-talk? It might be that I journal about it and I decide I will use the word stop, or I will, every time I become aware of it, I will ground myself back into the earth by taking a deep breath and remembering that the brilliance of God lives within me. And I might actually counter my negative self-talk. This might be part of my practice that I work at. I might counter my negative self-talk with a reminder. I might just saying, you're beloved. You are beloved of God. Stop beating yourself up. It might be as simple as that. That might be my practice the next 40 days, and it might be very difficult to do if we struggle with inner self-talk. If it's my anger, I might commit to every time I feel that anger coming, just taking a time out. And if I'm in a meeting or somewhere else, if I can't physically leave the room, I might just take an inward time out. I might even see myself like calling time, like you would if you were playing like a basketball game. Calling time out, going inward, listening for what really is being violated for me here, and then hearing that whistle from the ref that the game begins again, getting back in there, aware of what is going on, and maybe even then to take action, speak what I need to speak, take action however it needs to be. That might be a plan I can make, a practice I can do around my anger, if that's what I've heard in the quiet. If it is like a depressive kind of funk that I've been in, I gotta admit that being in a sling for what's been like 8 weeks now, it's easy to slide right into a funk. And so it might be, if you're somebody like me who's like struggling with being in that place of melancholy or a funk, or like everything's just so hard right now in the world, then again, I might need to make that plan to take a time out. And one way to come out of a funk is to literally just list 3 things for which I can be grateful. Like, I am grateful that I'm not at week 1 of being in my sling. And I am grateful that I can move my fingers again. And I am grateful that I can at least like clothe and prepare myself a little bit easier than I could 8 weeks ago. So that could be a practice of, if I'm in that melancholy funk, I might just when I become aware of it, take my time out and start my gratitude list. Like, I'm grateful I can breathe. And, there are people who have a very difficult time breathing every day. So again, it might be that becomes a part of my gratitude. It can be something as simple as that. I'm grateful I can take just the next breath. I can be out of pain for just this second, even if the next second might be filled with pain. But I can be in this moment and out of pain and allow myself to be able to take the next breath, to ask God to help me take the next breath. So we need to sort of spend this time of quiet reflecting upon what I've heard that's getting in the way of being my radiant self, what I can do to change that, and then what plan, what true practice will I put into place for these next 40 days. I will be intentional about this. And as we are coming forth from this time of quiet and stillness, inwardly let us express gratitude for all that we have heard. And even if we don't have it all worked out yet, of how we can stop or how we can change this thing getting in the way of being our radiant, beautiful, God-breathed self. Be grateful for what we have heard. And then make that commitment, an inward commitment. I will be about this practice in the next 40 days. And I'm going to invite us now to open our eyes, if we've had them closed, to come out of that time of centeredness and stillness. And the action I want us each to do, based on what we've heard, is to go somewhere and write it down, or send yourself a text message and say, this is what I've committed to. or write it on a scrap of paper and post it somewhere, or go grab your red lipstick and put it on your mirror if you need to write it that way, so that whenever you're at that mirror, you can say, oh, this is the practice. I've committed myself to X, whatever the practice is that you have heard. Anything can be a practice, a spiritual discipline that can help me move from what's getting in the way to a new way of being. And literally, like I said, Lent is 40 days. It only takes 21 days to develop a habit. You got plenty of time to perfect this practice, but it takes commitment. I'll tell you a little story with my sling. Every day I have to take off the sling, and there are exercises I have to do every day. If I don't do them, my arm continues to get crunched in, and I will have pain, and my arm literally will never go straight if I don't get it out and do my little practice. Something as simple as that. I have ways I have to strengthen my wrist and practice my grip. All of those things have been impacted by a shoulder repair surgery. And so I have to practice every day, or I will not have full function of my arm. And that's important to me, to have full function of my arm and my hand once again. So even a little simple practice each and every day. We call it homework at therapy. It's my at-home homework. But when I work with people as a healing practitioner, I often will give them homework, because homework, moving from the session with me into my life and making that actual commitment to do or say or be about what we spent the whole time in our session talking about and reflecting upon and learning about, hearing the wisdom of how it can apply in my life. If I don't do the homework of applying it in my life, it's not helpful at all. And maybe you've been in this experience. You come back to a therapist or a client comes back to you again and again and again, and they've made no progress whatsoever. And you know that no matter how much they keep coming, they're never going to move forward in their lives. It takes the commitment of a practice. And that is the beauty of this season of Lent. It doesn't have to be something we're saying, all down about or whatever, but to see this as a time where I truly can move through what is keeping me from being this beautiful, radiant being that God has made me to being this beautiful, radiant. What's keeping me from doing that? And then literally becoming that a little bit more by the end of these 40 days. There you go, folks. That's our pause for peace today. And I hope that you will commit to your practice. If you want to jot a note to me and let me know what your practice is, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to put that in our comments today, what you've heard and what you're going to commit to being about, what practice. If you want to use that language of what I'm giving up, but remember, also let us know what you're taking on as your practice to move you into being that beautiful, radiant self. Have a wonderful week. I will see you next time.